Well, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for our keynote address. Mr. Michael Lee Chin is the President and CEO of AICE Limited, also the Chairman of the Berkshire TWC Financial Group Incorporated, as well as the Chairman of the National Commercial Bank of Jamaica. We've all heard many things, I'm sure, in the media about Mr. Lee Chin. We know he's a success from the titles and the recognition he's been given, but I think he's also a success because you see in those images of him and all the pictures, the magazine covers, he's always got that wonderful smile. And I think that is a great sign of the success that he's been able to achieve in his career and his life.
You are his admirer then.
Does it sound like that?
請今晚嘅主講嘉賓李巡先生，佢係利基投資顧問公司主席同行政總監，亦都係 Berkshire TWC 金融財務集團主席兼牙買加國民銀行主席嘅，有請李先生為我哋主持。
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me at the back? Can you hear me at the back? No? That's the reason why technology, we are very reticent in investing in technology. Can you now hear me? Can you now hear me? Better? Okay, better? Okay, firstly, I'd like to congratulate the 6 winners tonight. Great job, excellent. You have a wonderful future ahead of you if you maintain your focus and discipline. Dignitaries, VIPs, and fellow entrepreneurs, it's a pleasure being here, and I must apologize for my lateness. So I am the reason why we started late. I just misinterpreted the distance from Greensville, Ontario. This audience actually reminds me of an audience I was in back in 1962. I was 11 years old, and it was my first day in high school. And the custos of the parish, who is equivalent to the lieutenant governor of the province, was addressing the freshmen, first day in high school. And his name was Mr. Grosset. Mr. Grosset said to us, "Boys and girls, opportunity knocks but once." When he said that, my heart sank, because I thought to myself, my gosh, what if when opportunity comes knocking, that one opportunity in my life, when it comes knocking, I'm sleeping. Or I'm dreaming. I used to gaze out the classroom window. Or I'm playing marbles. We didn't have television then. Then my life is over. So for the next 14 years, I didn't sleep, I didn't gaze, nor did I play marbles. I'm looking out for the opportunity. Until this friend of mine, Donovan, said, "Mike, you look sleep deprived." I said, if you didn't have sleep for 14 years, you would be looking as sleep deprived as I am. I'm looking for the opportunity, Donovan. He said, "Mike, you've gotten it wrong. Every day, there are opportunities. Every day. But unfortunately, most of us, number one, don't recognize when opportunities come floating by. And number two, even if we do recognize when opportunities come floating by, we don't have the courage to grasp them. So I said, "Why is that, Donovan?" He said, "It's simple, Mike. Invariably, when opportunities come floating by, they're usually clad in a crisis. And during a crisis, how do you feel, Mike? I feel awful. I feel like pulling the blanket over my head and going back to sleep." Right. That's because, Mike, you're focused on the danger component implicit in a crisis. But Mike, remember, the Chinese definition of the word crisis has 2 components. Crisis equals danger plus big opportunity. So Mike, whenever there's a crisis, you will feel awful. But just remember to pause, take a deep breath, suppress your emotions, and ask the question, where are the opportunities? Where are the opportunities? So, I had a fantastic opportunity to test that Chinese theory back on September the 2nd, 1999. And on September the 2nd, 1999, there was an article written in the Globe and Mail. It was entitled, AIC's Disadvantage, No Friends on Bay Street. We started our business in Hamilton, and we grew from a basement. And at the time, just to put a background to the scenario, technology stocks were booming. Everybody wanted the new economy stocks. So the NASDAQ was bloating. No one wanted the good old cash flow companies, the likes of Loblaws, TD Bank, etc., etc. Nobody wanted that. That was passé. And unit holders were redeeming from the fund that I manage, which is the Advantage Fund. And this article basically said, look, unit holders, AIC, the AIC Advantage Fund, which is managed by Michael Leachin, is suffering from net redemptions today. And as you all know, Mike has a unique philosophy for mutual funds that he invests in a few businesses and he takes big positions in a few businesses. So he concentrates. So when he has to sell those securities within the Advantage Fund, the fact of him selling will drive the stocks down even further. So TD Bank will be driven down, Loblaw will be driven down, Mackenzie will be driven down, and your unit value will go down even further. So unit holders, sell now. Now, anyone reading this newspaper would conclude that that is rational. So when I came in this particular morning to work, 9 a.m., I was late that morning. Vice President, the Executive Vice President, Mike, how come you look so chirper? I said, what's wrong? He said, didn't you see the newspaper today? I said, no. So he handed it to me. And I saw this article, AIC's Disadvantage, in the Globe and Mail, No Friends on Bay Street, written by Andrew Willis. Right? So I went into my office and I literally cried because all I saw was a run on our business. That's all I saw. And I was fearful for the next hour. My emotions overcame me because all I saw was the end of our wonderful business. Then, an hour later, this voice kept saying, Mike, remember, the Chinese not wrong. Crisis is synonymous with big opportunity, Mike. So think about the opportunity. Ask yourself the question, Mike, where are the opportunities in this crisis? Because there is definitely a crisis. You feel bad, you look pallid, etc., etc. So there must be a crisis here. So at which point I said, okay, where are the opportunities? There must be one here. Couldn't come up with it. Where are the opportunities? Where are the opportunities? Eureka, it came to me. Everybody was assuming, the whole country was assuming that we would have, as the portfolio manager, would have had to sell our few businesses, great businesses. So I thought, what if I didn't sell? And by virtue of the fact that everybody's assuming that I had to sell, those stocks were not being bought. Because the consensus wisdom was, why buy now? We can buy later, cheaper. So I thought, what if I didn't sell? What if I started to buy? Because the conditions are ripe for buying. These businesses are selling at historically low multiples. For instance, Mackenzie Financial Corporation was selling for 4.5 times cash flow. Typically, these businesses sell for 10 to 12 times cash flow. So it was on sale 60% off. So there was the opportunity. So I said, okay, now, time to buy. But I couldn't use the mutual fund to buy because I had to keep cash to meet redemptions. So there are only two other potential sources left. One is our own corporate coffers. Two, using other people's money. And all of us are well acquainted with that. So I thought, okay, call the bank, and I said, please line up the line of credit, because we're going to use it as of now. Called the Globe and Mail and spoke to Shirley One. And said, Shirley, please. Actually, Shirley called me and said, Mike, there was an article today, what's your response? So I gave her my response. I said, Shirley, here's what I'm going to do today. In fact, what I have done, we have started buying Mackenzie at $13.25 per share. And we bought 256,000 shares today. So please, Shirley, I beg you, make sure you go and put it in the newspaper today. Make sure, I beg you. She said, Mike, I don't have that latitude. Is Shirley here? She said, Mike, I don't have that latitude. I have to go to my editor. So I said, Shirley, you have to tell your editor that an injustice has been done. What's the injustice, Mike? Well, this man wrote an article, and it has the potential of putting me out of business. We have to have an opportunity to respond. So therefore, you have to write this article. So she said, she went to her editor, and she told the editor. She called me back, Mike, we got an article. So I said, please, in the article, and you can go back in history today and pull up the Globe and Mail, September the 3rd, 1999, and you'll see the response. I said, Shirley, today I bought 256,000 shares of Mackenzie Financial Corporation at 13 and a quarter. I said, please, diarize it, because I want for the world to see what my behavior was when times were dismal. In other words, our behavior today will be our history tomorrow. Our behavior today will be our history tomorrow. So, in the ensuing 6 weeks, we spent $100 million of our money, not unit holders' money, and the bank's money. We borrowed $50 million from the bank and bought Mackenzie. Average price, $15 per share. Average valuation, 4 or 5 times cash flow. A year and 2 months later, we're locked in battle with Investors Group. Who remembers this? Anybody remembers this? We're locked in battle with Investors Group, trying to take over Mackenzie, because by now we had owned 25% of Mackenzie, 20% in the mutual funds, 5% by us. So the price kept going up, 20, 21, 25, 27, at 30. I said, you have it. So that day, September the 2nd, 1999, when we sold for $30, unit holders of the Advantage Fund made $400 million in profits. AICE corporate made $100 million in profits. That day, those profits would not have occurred unless there was a crisis on September the 2nd. So ladies and gentlemen, our behavior today is our history tomorrow. Now, 3 years later, made a call to Andrew. I said, Andrew, come on down to Burlington, we have a story for you. He said, what's the story? Come. So he came down, and now for 3 years, I had this one well choreographed. So I knew exactly where he was going to be seated, and I knew exactly what I was going to be saying on cue. So he came in, nice it is, hi, how are you, etc., etc. So I placed him right in front of me, and over my right shoulder, he could see a beautiful annex that we had just completed. Beautiful. So right on cue, he said, Mike, what a lovely building. I said, yes, and we call it the Andrew Willis Wing. So I said, what do you mean? So I said, Andrew, On September the 2nd, 1999, you wrote a story. And you took it to your editor, and the editor approved it. So that was chapter 1. Let me now tell you about the fallout from that story, which will be chapters 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I narrated the story as I told it to you. And he said, man, you made $400 million for the unit holders and $100 million for AIC? I said, yes. He said, that was a fantastic investment. You spent 75 cents to buy the newspaper, and you made $100 million out of it? I said, no, Andrew. No. We took $20 million out of the 75, out of the 100 million, and built that annex for cash. And we took $80 million and made a down payment on the largest commercial bank in Jamaica, called the National Commercial Bank, which was owned by the government for 4 years. We were trying to sell it. No one wanted it. So we took $80 million and put into that bank. And at the time, Andrew, that $80 million was now worth then $400 million. Today, he said, what? So I said, Andrew, please write another bad article. Today, that $80 million is worth $800 million. That would not have occurred. That would not have occurred if there was not a crisis. If there was not September the 2nd, 1999. So, ladies and gentlemen, whenever there's a crisis, we have two choices. And our choice will determine our history. So make sure whenever there's a choice, we default back to some fundamental principles. Crisis. Make crisis synonymous with opportunities. You'll feel bad, but ask the question, where are the opportunities? The second story I'd like to narrate to you was back in 1987. In 1987, January 1987, we started AIC. Just bought it. And at the time, AIC had $800,000 in assets, client assets. $800,000, not much. That's when we bought it. So we thought, okay, how are we going to compete against the Royal Bank of Canada, Bank of Nova Scotia, Mackenzie, Fidelity, AGF, etc. We are money managers, right? How are we going to compete against these behemoths when they have the big reputation and we had nothing? I was just a lowly salesman mutual fund salesman in Hamilton. So how are we going to compete? So I thought, let's go back to fundamentals. Because it's easy when you get in the midst of the fray, the midst of competition, you forget about fundamentals. So we went back to fundamentals and we thought, when clients invest, what are they trying to achieve? Well, clients are trying to achieve three things, basically. Number one, they're trying to achieve preservation of their capital, because nobody likes to lose money. Number two, they want to make an above average rate of return, real rate of return. And number three, everybody is trying to minimize taxes. Am I right? Those are the three reasons why people invest. So I thought, if I could find a very articulate, efficient, time-proven solution to achieve those three needs, then we'd have a wonderful business. So I defaulted back to another principle. You want to be successful? This three-step formula will always work, guaranteed. Anybody interested to hear? Really? You don't sound to me enthusiastic. Okay. You twisted my elbow. In whatever endeavor you're seeking success in, this three-step formula will always work. Number one, identify a role model. Who has done this job fantastically well before me? Number two, ask the role model. No. Sorry, don't ask. Kneel at the role model's feet and say, please, role model, I beg you, Give me the recipe. How did you become so successful in this particular endeavor? Whether it's parenting, whether it's being a great academic, whether it's being a great athlete, or whether it's being a great investor. Identify role model number one. Get the recipe number two. And number three, don't be arrogant. Don't put your signature on it. Don't tweak the recipe. Do the same. So that was the formula. So I thought, who in the world have done the best job possible at achieving those three goals? Who? And I thought, the wealthy, successful business people in our community. They're the ones who have created wealth. And by the way, wealth creation is a function of optimizing three variables. Number one, maximize capital preservation. Number two, maximize your rate of return. And number three, minimize taxes. Natural byproduct, you will create wealth. Simple. Now, what I do is simple, not easy. It's very simple, the formula. So, who have done the best job possible? The successful business people in our society. So, what's the formula? Job number one done. We have identified the role models. Job number two, find out what is their common thread between all of them. So from early on in my career, I started to read Forbes Billionaires magazine because I thought, you want a role model, you go straight to the top of the class. These people must know. And I started trying to figure out, is there a common thread between all their behavior? Whether they're in Hong Kong, Mr. Li Ka-shing, Mexico, Carlos Slim, United States, Bill Gates, etc., etc. Is there a common thread between their behavior? Irrespective of what sector of the economy they are in, what geographical location they're located in, is there a common thread between their behavior? Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Whether we're talking about the wealthiest people in the world or the wealthiest people in Markham, they use one formula. Anybody interested to know what the formula is? Okay, so here's what we saw. All of these people, to preserve their capital, to grow it, and to minimize taxes, here's what they do. Number one, to preserve their capital, they own a few excellent businesses. It's the antithesis of diversification. Wealthy people, they own a few excellent businesses. Number two, they really understand the few excellent businesses. So that key word there, understand, differentiates between investing and speculating. Speculators really don't understand what they own. Investors do. So to preserve their capital, what they do is own a few businesses that they really understand. That's how they preserve their capital. The second goal is to get a great real rate of return on their money. How do they do this? They make sure that those few excellent businesses that they understand are all domiciled in strong long-term growth industries. It's a combination of high-quality businesses that they understand sitting on top of a rising tide, long-term growth industries, that gives a great rate of return. And lastly, how do they minimize taxes? They simply hold. They don't sell. Right, Mr. Mintz? You sell, you don't trigger taxes. Right, Mr. Mintz? Right, so that's it. Simple. That's how wealth is created. And by the way, lastly, all of them created their wealth by using other people's money. Right, Mr. Mintz? You'd know. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is a simple formula that we identified early in my career as to how wealth is created. So I thought, having defined the formula, now what Mr. Galen Weston, a very second wealthiest person in Canada, once said to me, Mike, you really want to be successful? Yes, sir. Simple. Success is 1% strategy, 99% execution. 1% strategy, 99% execution. So now we have the strategy. of wealth creation, right? That's only 1%. We now have to put into place the 99%. But, and this is where most people go awry, because on the execution part. So what we also noticed in our preliminary analysis was money managers who were managing money, portfolio managers, they grew up, they're taught the concept of diversification. You don't put all your eggs in one basket, just spread your risk. So typically, your average mutual fund would own 150, 200 different businesses. So I thought, wow, superimpose that behavior against how Galen Weston behaves, how Warren Buffett behaves, how Bill Gates behaves, how Mr. Lee Ka-shing behaves. It's crazy. Because these rich people don't own 150 different businesses. Because if you own 150 businesses, Mr. Mintz will tell you it's impossible to understand them. Right, Mr. Mintz? Right? And if you don't understand what you own, what are you doing? Are you investing or are you speculating? You're speculating. First thing. Secondly, I noticed that these portfolio managers, whether they're from the most eminent business company, firms, reputable, but they all behave the same. Not only do they own 150 different businesses, they turn them over every 15 months, year and a half. Am I right, Mr. Mintz? So, what they're doing in that case is equivalent to you having to understand 150 new businesses every 18 months. Is that possible? And if you don't understand what you own, right? What are you doing? You're speculating. So I concluded early in my career that the behavior practiced by venerable, eminent business companies, my competitors, is fraught with folly. And it has nothing to do with investing. Investing is owning a few excellent businesses that you understand, that are in strong growth industries, and you intend to hold for the long run. That's investing. So having that, define the strategy. We now said, okay, we now have to commit ourselves to this strategy and focus and be determined, because nobody's going to believe it for the first 5 years. Be courageous, persevere, be disciplined, be passionate, think long term. That was why Mr. Buffett, when he was asked, how come you're so successful? He said, what I do is simple, not easy. Because it's not easy to be disciplined over the long run. It's not easy to be committed to anything over the long run. It's not easy to be passionate over the long run. It's not easy to persevere over the long run. Am I right? So that's the reason why everybody isn't successful, because you need to invoke all of those character traits. And the only way I know to invoke all of those character traits is to have a firm belief in a principle, or in principles, in a philosophy, in a value system that you really believe in and you're willing to stand up and be a martyr for. In other words, none of us will accomplish any degree of success beyond any degree of unless we commit our life to a purpose that transcends making money. Making money will be a natural byproduct. Making money will be a natural byproduct. So armed with all of that, we now set out, and knowing what we had to invoke, the character traits we had to invoke, we were guided and we were given strength when times were great, because when times are good, the hazard is that you become arrogant and you depart from your core principles, especially in investing. Times are good, you get greedy. Emotions trip in. Times are bad, you get fearful. Emotions trip in. And when Mr. Buffett was asked, Warren, how did you grow from zero to $40 billion in net worth? He said, to be successful in the long run doesn't require stratospheric IQ. At which point I said, thank God for that. Unusual business insight or any particular inside information. We don't need any of that. What's needed, number one, is a sound intellectual framework for decisions, number one. And number two, the ability to keep one's emotions from corroding that framework. So we need two things. We need a framework that we really believe in, and secondly, we need control of emotions. What I do is simple, not easy. It's not easy, but it's not easy to control emotions. There are three things that we have to focus on, I think, to be successful. Number one, we have to focus on our knowledge base. Number two, we have to focus on our experience base. And number three, we have to control our emotions. If we have knowledge, if we have experience, and we control our emotions, we are well on the way. So ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the examples, some of the pivotal points in my life that have got me to this point. And I can say that I'm standing here before this eminent crowd because of two things. Number one, I've committed my life to a purpose. And the purpose is to, which is what we're doing, is to build a business that stands for one thing, that behaves based on one set of principles, the principles of how wealth is created. That's number one. And number two, I'm standing here before you, ladies and gentlemen, not because in addition to having a purpose, a commitment, principles, a value system that I'll not violate, but I also think long term. And when you think long term, there's a totally different trajectory of behavior that you have than versus when you think short term. So it's been a pleasure being here, and entrepreneurs, congratulations. And I'll just say to you one thing. My greatest fear is the following. I leave you with this. My greatest fear is that as I become more successful, I depart from my core principles that made me successful in the first place. That's my greatest fear, because it's easy to depart from your core principles that made you successful. So I always remember the following. Success begets arrogance, begets failure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Mr. Michael Lee-Chin for sharing your thoughts and wisdom and strategies. And as a member of the media, I would like to say how pleased I am that the media was so instrumental in that pivotal point in your growth of your financial career and your success.
I'm going to ask him to give me his resume. Get hold of his feet.